Scat by Carl Hiaasen. Chapter 5. The Truman School had once been known as the Tarpwick Academy, named after the man who had founded it 18 years earlier. Vincent Z. Tarpwick was a rich Rhode Island banker who moved to Southwest Florida and got even richer. Vincent Tarpwick didn't want his 3 snotty, pampered children attending school with ordinary kids, so he started his own private school and kept out just about everyone who didn't have the same skin color, religion, and political point of view as Vincent Tarpwick. As a result, the Tarpwick Academy had a ridiculously small enrollment and loss of money by the bucket full. Although Vincent Tarpwick didn't seem to care, when he died he left $200,000 to the school, which was a generous amount but hardly enough to keep it running forever. So the Board of Trustees gradually loosened up the admissions policy and began reaching out to the community, recruiting all kinds of students for the first time. Scholarships were offered to bright kids in athletics whose families couldn't afford the expensive tuition. Enrollment grew steadily, and so did the Tarpwick Academy's reputation. Things were rolling along smoothly until Vincent Tarpwick's kids, now graduated and grown to adulthood, started getting into trouble. The eldest, Vincent Jr., was caught embezzling millions of dollars from his late father's bank to support wild gambling junkets to Monaco. The middle one, Sandra Sue, on 3 occasions drank too much beer and drove her golf cart off the Naples pier. The youngest, Iggy, was arrested for ripping off Social Security checks from old folks living in the chain of shabby nursing homes that he owned. The name Tarpwick kept popping up in the newspapers, and not in a way that was flattering to the Tarpwick Academy. Ironically, the same spoiled children for whom the school was created had grown up to become its most embarrassing advertisement. In an emergency meeting held late one night after Iggy Tarpwick had been stopped at the Sarasota airport while wearing a diaper stuffed with cash, the Board of Trustees voted unanimously to change the Academy's name. They chose to call it Truman School after President Harry S. Truman, who'd been dead for a long time and therefore was unlikely to cause any public relation problems. To save money, the board voted not to replace the entire granite statue of Vincent G. Tarpwick that's in front of the school's auditorium. Instead, a local sculptor was hired to chisel off Vincent Tarpwick's face and reshape the remaining of the nub of stone into studios features of the 33rd President of the United States. The sculptor did the best he could, working on a tight schedule with a low budget. The statue's new face was distinguished enough, but as small as the kitten's. Fortunately, the finished piece did not bear a striking resemblance to Harry S. Truman. The body was all wrong, and nothing could be done about it. Vincent Z. Tarpwick had weighed 251 pounds, while President Truman had weighed only 175. As a result, most people viewing the school statue for the first time had no idea who it was supposed to be. When Nick and Marta stepped off the bus, 3 sheriff's deputies were standing by the odd granite figure, guessing aloud at its identity. "What's going on?" Marta said to Nick. "Don't ask me. Maybe it's just say no day." Once a year, the Trumans will brought in police officers, doctors, and counselors to speak to the students about drug and alcohol abuse. However, the 3 deputies acted like they were on call. They carried clipboards and had portable radios turned on. "Something's up," said Marta. Nick agreed. "Maybe there was another break-in." Over the Christmas holidays, burglars have stolen several laptops from the school's computer lab. The culprits were 2 teenage boys from Fort Myers who were later caught speeding through the red light. The missing laptops stacked in the bed of their father's pickup truck. The kids had confessed that they intended to pawn the computers and use the money to buy video games. Martin nudged Nick and told him to ask the deputies why they were there. Probably because his dad was a military officer, Nick had no problem dealing with the authority figures, except for Miss Starch. As he approached one of the deputies, he heard her joking about that the Harry Truman said she looked like a bowling pin in an overcoat. "Excuse me?" Nick interrupted politely. "Did something happen here at the school this morning?" Papa was surprised. The deputy suddenly got serious. "We can't talk about it. Your principal will make an announcement." "The headmaster, you mean?" "Same difference." The first bell rang, and students started pouring into the auditorium. Marta and Nick found an empty row in the back near the door. Usually the morning assembly was incredibly boring, a good opportunity to finish your homework or return your text messages. After the daily blessing, which seemed to drag on forever, Dr. Jessler approached the podium and said he had a short statement to read. He unfolded a sheet of paper and began. "As some of you know, yesterday's field trip to Black Vine Swamp was ended early because of a small wildfire broken out in the area." Nick snapped shut his algebra book and sat up. Marta turned off her cell phone. "All Truman students were evacuated promptly and returned to campus safely," Dr. Jessler went on. "However, one of our biology teachers, Miss Starch, went back down the hiking path to retrieve a student's medicine. She did not return to the school and hasn't been seen, so we have reason to believe she might have gotten lost and had to spend the night in the swamp." A murmur rippled through the auditorium. Marta pinched Nick and said, "Oh my God." Nick's mind was racing. He hadn't yet told Marta what he and his mother had seen on the videotape. That the animal he thought was a panther was actually a human being, scrambling through the cypress. Now Nick couldn't help but wonder if that mysterious figure wearing the dark belt, the person who had been who had probably made that creepy animal cry, was involved with Mrs. Starch's disappearance. What if it was smoke, he thought. What if the kid went crazy and did something awful? Nick pried Marta's fingers from his arm. The authorities were out there at daybreak to continue watching for Miss Starch, Dr. Jessler continued from the stage. Fortunately, the fire went out and the weather last night was mild, so there's no reason to believe she's in any danger. I just need to put my phone on the charger, so give me like 2 seconds, because I'm putting it on. There we go. Okay, now back to the book. We are on page 54. if you aren't caught up. The search teams are experienced and very thorough, and I'm confident of a positive outcome, Nick whispered. I don't see smoke anywhere. Marta looked up and down the rows of heads in the auditorium. He's probably just late, she said. He's always late for an assembly. Yeah. This is so freaky, Nick. Marta puffed her cheeks and let the air hiss out. I mean, I can't stand the woman, but still, to think of her lost in that swamp. At the podium, Dr. Dressler turned the paper over and continued reading. You probably noticed some law enforcement officers on the campus this morning. Please don't be alarmed or make any rash assumptions. It's routine procedure in such cases. Students in Miss Starch's classes in the chat may be called to chat with the deputies today. I would encourage you to be as helpful as you can be, Marta said. I'd better call my mom. What for? Nick said. In case there's going to be something on TV about this. She'll wig out. Dr. Dressler concluded his prepared statement and moved on to less exciting announcements about an upcoming soccer tournament. A change in the lunch menu, no chili for a week due to spoiled shipments of ground beef, and a new rule in the dress code that banned all styles of open-toed sandals on campus. The students weren't listening. They were buzzing about Miss Starch. The mood in the auditorium was one of the restless curiosities. Not worry. Thanks to the headmaster's reassuring speech, most of the kids believed that the searchers would soon locate the missing teacher. Once Miss Starch was found, the Black Vine Swamp episode would only add to her colorful legend. After assembly, Nick and Marta stood by the Harry Truman statue and waited for the bell. Libby Marshall rushed over, highly agitated. Dr. Dressler was wrong. Miss Starch isn't lost. She got out of the glades last night, Libby blurted. I've got a lot to tell him, so he can put it on edge. You saw her? Where? Marta asked. Libby shook her head. I didn't see her, but she stopped by my house and left this on the porch. Libby displayed her asthma inhaler like a trophy. Sam found it. He's her dog, Nick said. Did anyone actually see her? No, but Sam heard her on the front steps and started barking like crazy. And who else could it be? She's the one who went back to find my inhaler. Although Nick didn't like Miss Starch any more than the other students, he'd been hoping that she wasn't hurt or worse. Libby's news was encouraging. 56. I wonder why she didn't knock, he said. 'Cause it was late, Libby said impatiently, and the lights were off. She probably didn't want to wake anyone up. That makes sense to Nick and Marta. Now I've gotta go find Droopy Dressler, said Libby, and straighten him out. She hurried off. The bell rang, and Marta picked up her backpack. I gotta admit, I'm glad that old hag made it out of this okay. Me too, Nick said. I don't know why we should care what happens to her, because she was doing a brave thing. Going back for Libby's medicine with a wildfire coming. Marta shrugged. Yeah, even witches have their good days. Dr. Dressler was hopeful but perplexed. After the assembly, he received a call from the fire lieutenant who reported that Bunny Starch's blue Prius was gone at daybreak when the crews had returned to Black Vine Swamp. The lieutenant surmised that sometime during the night Miss Starch had found her way back to her car. The theory was bolstered by the information from Libby Marshall, who burst into Dr. Dressler's office and blurted the story of her asthma inhaler so breathlessly that he feared she might need to use it. The fact strongly suggested that Miss Starch was alive and had safely exited the wilderness. And how else would Libby's lost medicine have been delivered to her front porch? What nagged Dr. Dresser was this. Nobody had seen or spoken to the biology teacher. She hadn't shown up for classes that morning. She hadn't given the circumstances was excusable, yet she hadn't even called to say she'd be absent. That was a violation of the Truman faculty attendance policy, and nobody was being stickler for the school rules than Miss Starch. In 18 years, she'd missed only one day of teaching, when she accidentally rolled her car while serving to avoid a rabbit on the way to school. She borrowed the ambulance driver's radio to call in sick, and the next day she had returned to Truman with a plastic cast on one arm, a patch over one eye, and 2 metal pins in her collarbone. After Libby left his office, Dr. Dresser immediately tried calling Miss Starch's cell phone, and calling and calling and calling. Then he phoned her house. No one answered there either. It was baffling. Dr. Dresser reluctantly agreed that the sheriff's deputies should go ahead and interview the students. Technically, at least Bunny Starch was still a missing person. After speaking with Libby, Nick, and Marta expected Miss Starch to be waiting with a pencil twirling in biology class. They were surprised to see Miss Muffet sitting at Miss Starch's desk. Even more surprised when a sheriff's deputy poked his head in the doorway and asked for Dwayne Scrod Jr. Miss Muffet said, "Dwayne's absent today." "All right." Deputy scanned his clipboard. "How about Graham Carson?" Graham eagerly raised his hand, and the deputy motioned for him to come along. Graham was beaming self-importantly as he marched from the room. "I don't get it," Marta murmured to Nick. "What's with the coughs? Don't they know the old bird is okay?" Nick was mystified as well. What if Miss Starch was safe? If Miss Starch was safe, why were the deputies hanging around and asking questions? Another uniformed officer entered the classroom and called Marta's name. Her eyes widened and looked fretfully at Nick. She said, "No big deal. Just tell him what you know." After a few minutes, Marta returned and looking annoyed, plopped down at her desk. "I told him Miss Starch was all right, but he keeps asking me more stuff." "Like what?" "No talking, please," Miss Muffet said. Sternly, she pointed to the blackboard, upon which she chalked the words, "Reread Chapter 8. Libby Marshall was called out next, and Nick assumed that she would be the final interview. Once Libby told them that Miss Starch had delivered the asthma inhaler last night, the deputies would realize there was nothing to investigate. But Libby came back into class, red-faced and fuming. Nick wondered what in the world was going on. One by one, the remainder of Miss Starch's biology students were summoned. Sometimes the interviews were short, and sometimes they lasted a while. There were so many interruptions from kids coming and going, it was difficult to concentrate on the Calvin cycle or any other topic in the biology book. Nick was last to be called. He was led to an empty classroom by the same female deputy to whom he'd spoken near the Truman statue. The deputy told Nick to sit down, which he did, and relax, which was impossible. "Let's go over what happened at the field trip yesterday," she said. Balanced on her lap was a clipboard holding a blank report form, upon which she printed Nick's full name. When Miss Starch turned back to look for the young lady's asthma inhaler, "You're sure she was alone?" "Yes, I saw her walking down the boardwalk all by herself," Nick said. The deputy scribbled on the paper. Nick quickly added, "She must be all right because she brought back Libby's asthma inhaler last night. Did you know that?" The deputy nodded and kept writing. "Then I don't get the point of all this," Nick said. "Let's go back to the day before the field trip," said the deputy. "I want to ask you about something that happened in class between Miss Starch and a boy named Dwayne Scrod." Nick felt the muscles in his neck. "She had pointed a pencil at him and he bit it in half. Didn't he also threaten her? What do you mean?" the deputy said. Some of your classmates remember Dwayne saying something like, "You're gonna be sorry," and then Miss starts saying, "Is that a threat? Do you recall such a conversation?" Nick recalled it quite clearly. He also recalled worrying that Smoke might be serious. Nick felt uneasy telling this to the deputy, but he couldn't be sure what Dwayne's squad had meant. But Nick's father had told him to always be truthful, no matter how hard it might be. Miss Starch told Dwayne to write 500 words about pimples. Nick began. "That's no joke." The deputy obviously had heard about that essay from the other students because she displayed no reaction. Nick went on. Then Dwayne said something like, "You'll be sorry." Whatever, he was mad. He was mad. Kids say all kinds of stupid stuff when they're mad. The deputy took a few more notes. "Does Dwayne have a nickname?" she asked, as if she didn't already know. "Smoke," Nick said. "Why do they call them that?" "Because that's what he wants to be called." The deputy glanced. Some of the other kids said it's because he's Fryomaniac, because he likes to mess with fire. "I don't know. We don't hang together," Nick said. "But you've heard that rumor, right?" Nick could sense the deputy wanted to say that Dwayne was a nutcase. I thought you wanted me to stick to what I saw and not what I know," he said. "I didn't think you were interested in rumors." The deputy raised her eyebrows. "Sometimes rumors turn out to be true, Nick." "Can I go back to class now?" she said. The wildfire at Blackvine Swamp wasn't really a wildfire. It was an arson. What? The investigators called it a controlled burn. Whoever set the fire also dug a trench line on the other side so it would burn itself out. They knew what they were doing, the deputy said. Nick was dumbfounded. The deputy tapped her pen lightly on the clipboard. "Do you think Dwayne would ever try such a thing to get back at Miss Starch for what happened in class? Light a bushfire to freak her out and spoil the field trip?" "I have no idea," Nick said honestly. In his mind he was replaying the glimpse of that tannish blur in the cypress trees. The panther that turned out to be a human. Maybe it was Smoke. Nick kept this thought to himself. He needed to go home and look at the videotape of the swamp prowler again. The deputy went on. Dwayne was pretty angry about the essay assignment, wasn't he? "Sure," said Nick, thinking. Who wouldn't be angry? The Starch had totally humiliated the guy. "Were you aware that Dwayne got in trouble once for burning down a construction trailer out near Immokalee? He was only 10 years old when it happened," the deputy said. "Another time they caught him torching a billboard on the interstate using mops dipped in gasoline. 3 in the morning, a state trooper busted him." "Are you serious?" Nick was stunned. "Those weren't typical dumb kid pranks. They were crimes. Are you afraid of Dwayne?" The deputy asked. "Not really. He doesn't hassle anyone." "Was Miss Starch afraid of him?" Nick had to chuckle at that one. The deputy asked what was so funny. He said, "If you met Miss Starch, you'd think it was pretty funny too." The deputy scribbled another few lines, then capped her pen. "Nick, do you have any idea where we might find Dwayne?" Nick firmly shook his head. "Nope, that's the truth." The deputy rose. "Thanks for your help." "I really don't know the guy at all," Nick insisted. "That's the thing, nobody seems to know him, do they?" She opened the door and motioned for Nick to leave. Chapter 6. Sorry if you couldn't understand anything I was saying. It's very difficult to record a video.